Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome home to our Torah conversations. First of all, happy 71st birthday, Israel. Yom Huledet Sameach. Happy birthday. May you continue to go from strength to strength. Rabbi Eric Yaffe, in his wonderful blog post in Haaretz this week, spoke to those of us who might have felt somewhat torn about celebrating Israel right now, when so many criticisms are being raised about the dramatic weakening of Israel's democratic fiber. Yaffe asks us to remember that Israel, the vision, the dream, the hope, the aspiration is not the same thing as Israel, the current reality. And that's the way things normally are. No current state is ever the full expression of its founders' dreams. We rejoice, therefore, in the rebirth of the Jewish state, its strength, its resilience, its incredible achievements. We rejoice in the vision that the current state is struggling to realize, and we pledge our unyielding support for those endeavors. My next book, being published this fall by the CCR Press, will offer some specific guidelines as to just how we might manage to do that. Okay. Last week, we discussed a topic that caught the attention of many of you, very large, unusual response. The Sedra tells us in its opening words to be Kedoshim, holy. But no single human being could ever possibly fulfill the qualifications of holiness as listed in the 51 separate mitzvot in this Sedra. However, here's the thing. If we view the commandment to be holy as being addressed to each individual, it won't work. But if it is addressed to the entire Jewish collective, then the command has powerful depth and meaning and resonance. We are to be holy collectively. Our individual strivings will meet the divine standards only as the product of our communal strivings. Nechama Leibowitz makes a similar point when she quotes a Rashi to Rambam, to Maimonides, in his Hilchot Deot. Quote, "To achieve holiness, one must join God-fearing people, study and pray and act with them." Maimonides, holiness can only be achieved within community, not through isolation. Holiness can only be achieved through community and not through isolation. What a powerful rationale for strengthening the elements of our Jewish communal life. So we go back to chapter 19 of the book of Leviticus, the so-called Holiness Code. We're going to be in verse 13, 19:13, and we suddenly find ourselves hearing yet another set of ancient concerns that speak powerfully to the 21st century. Quote, "You shall not oppress your neighbor nor rob him. The wages of a hired person shall not remain with you all night until the morning." Thank you, honey. It's very nice to see you. You've been away for a while. If the Torah were just any other book, we might simply glide past this verse without giving it much thought. But that's just not how Torah conversations are carried out. So we ask, as the rabbis would, why is the command, "don't oppress," put into the same verse as "don't rob"? Maimonides points out that there are two words used in the Torah for robbery, stealing: gezel and geneva. You know geneva, you know the word Yiddish, ganef. It's the same root. Our text here uses gezel. And for Maimonides, that choice means breaking and entering, or taking anything not your own by force. Okay, we shouldn't do that. But then, what's oppression different from gezel? Other commentators mentioned by Leibowitz suggest that oppression is that which is carried out by the strong against the weak. Both the oppressor and the robber act openly, brazenly. That's why the text has them side by side, oppression, robbery. They act openly. But the oppressor doesn't take anything. The oppressor withholds that which is due to someone else who is politically or socially or economically, educationally weaker. When a day laborer completes her work and expects to be paid on the spot, day laborer, and the boss says, come back tomorrow and I'll pay you, that's oppression, not theft. If you've loaned someone money and the time has arrived for repayment and you're told, I'll pay you next week, that's oppression. If you pay dues into a labor union and only the labor bosses seem to be making any money, that's oppression. When you are singled out in a classroom for reprimand, not because what you did is measurably worse than what a whole bunch of other kids are doing, but because you are a kid of color, that's oppression. Leibowitz then goes out after the various, and I love this, bureaucracies in our society that seem fully accustomed to practicing oppression. Government offices that are more committed to process than to people, that's not rudeness, that's oppression. Or, here's a bad one, when we call our cable company and find that someone out there has developed a system that rejoices in forcing people to wait endlessly on the phone, a process that we all know, even under the best of circumstances, will ultimately take many days to resolve, that's oppression. And have you ever waited in line only to be told as you finally reached the person you wanted to speak with that it's time for his or her lunch break or maybe a mandated coffee break? I have experienced every one of those things. And I don't recall feeling anything other than personally injured. That's oppression. Oppression is the act of denying someone something that is their due. We should never have to feel that such oppression is just doing business as usual, or that's just the way things are done around here. You know, there's an interesting and sometimes confounding problem that comes with understanding oppression this way. How does any society develop a consensus around that which is everyone's due? Absolute equality is a fantasy. It flies in the face of biology and happenstance and history. So who determines what we are due? How much education are we entitled to? How much health care entitled to? How much financial stability? What kind of retirement is the minimum due to each one of us? The Torah and rabbinic tradition offer idealized models that lack real specificity and detail. That's a problem. And I guess that is where we enter the equation. The manner in which we determine the boundary lines of oppression will say an enormous amount about who we are, what kinds of values we really hold dear, and how concerned we are with the biblical vision of a just society. Who is entitled to what? 51 mitzvot are to be found in the Sedra, known as Kedoshim. Each one of them is a building block for what Reformed Jews would call the Messianic era. The rabbis taught that in our Sedra, the most demanding of the 51, do you know what it is? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. As with that prohibition of oppression, even the globally embraced mandate of loving our neighbor asks more questions than it answers. Who, after all, are our neighbors? Do those neighbors who are most like us deserve an edge in the manner in which we express our love? What kind of ethics is it, by the way, that is built upon self-love? Love neighbor as yourself. And since we can't and don't ever love two people equally, how do we shape the guidelines for the choices we make, for the behaviors we embrace? To grasp the meanings of oppression in our Sedra, and in understanding the command to love our neighbor, I would state that there is a single shimmering thread that weaves everything together. Simple and shimmering. Love. Extend to others the kind of love that we ourselves need. Then we'll understand what oppression is. Then we will understand all those who are our neighbors. Many good things will flow from that decision. Okay, that's it for today. What a great Sedra. And before you go off humming, all we need is love, remember, hit share. Shabbat shalom, my friends. See you next week.